families, the Brahmanas.
Most of all the families, the Brahmanas.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Are you feeling compunction? Is that the right word, Vijay?
Kind of guilt or moral scruple that prevents or follows the doing of something bad.
Pronunciation, compunction?
Yeah.
Compunction for the unhappy women and children who are left forlorn by unscrupulous persons. Or are you unhappy because the goddess of learning is being handled by brahmanas addicted to acts against the principles of religion? Or are you sorry to see that the brahmanas have taken shelter of administrative families that do not respect Brahminical culture? Purport: in this age of Kali, the women and children, along with the brahmanas and cows, will be grossly neglected and left unprotected. In this age, illicit connection with women will render many women and children uncared for. Circumstantially, the women will try to become independent of the protection of men, and marriage will be performed as a matter of formal agreement between man and woman. In most cases, the children will not be taken care of properly. The brahmanas are traditionally intelligent men, and thus they will be able to pick up modern education to the topmost ranks. But as far as moral and religious principles are concerned, they shall be the most fallen. Education and bad character go ill together, but such things will run parallel. The administrative heads as a class will condemn the tenets of Vedic wisdom and will prefer to conduct a so-called secular state, and the so-called educated brahmanas will be purchased by such unscrupulous administrators. Even a philosopher and writer of many books on religious principles may also accept an exalted post in a government which denies all the moral codes of the Shastras. The brahmanas are specifically restricted from accepting such service. But in this age, they will not only accept service, but they will also do so even if it is of the meanest quality. These are some of the symptoms of the Kali age, which are harmful to the general welfare of human society. Om Jnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakoya Chakshurunminitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Putale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swam Padantikam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine Namo Mahavarannaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauritase Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopeshva Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sudedevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarumbischa Kriba Sindhu Vevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Durgame Patime Nantasya Sakalat Paragater Muhur Swakripa Yasti Danena Santa Sanpavalambanam. Yesterday when I was on book distribution, this she looked like she was from Burma or something. Practically half the population at De Anza College was from Burma and Myanmar yesterday. And she walked up to the table. I called her over and she walked up and showing her the books, and she said, hey, no, I'm atheist. I said, all right, well, can I ask you a question? She said, yeah, sure, why not? And I said, do you think this painting came together by accident? She said, of course not. Second. She said, of course not. I said, well, how did it come together? She said, a painter put it together. I said, all right. So do you think nature is beautiful? She said, of course. And I said, well, just like the painting is beautiful and it didn't come together by accident. If nature is beautiful, do you think that came together by accident? She said, yeah, but it's easier for me to accept the painter than the nature. I said, all right, well, I mean, you agree that the painting was drawn by a person, so why can't you accept the nature? She said, I just can't accept it. I said, oh, anyways, the Bhagavad Gita can help explain these things for you. And she said, oh, I don't like religion. I said, well, why is that? And she said, oh, because it's sexist. So this is actually the nature of Kali Yuga, that people are unable to appreciate the value of spiritual principles, and they have a lot of bad ideas. Prayena alpasyata sabya kalau vasmin yadejanaha. Manda sumanda matayo manda bhagya ripatadraha. It's described in the Bhagavatam that people in Kali Yuga, they have a lot of bad ideas as to how to be happy. And many times those ideas are devoid of any conception of God consciousness. So recently I was listening to a class by Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, and he was describing how when people can understand the law of karma, then there's an inherent sense of responsibility which one has to take on in their activities once they accept the law of karma. So it's just like if you're driving on the highway, there's traffic laws which you have to follow. Now you can neglect those traffic laws, but there's consequences which are immediate, practically speaking. And you can see the result of having broken the traffic laws. So by obeying the traffic laws, one is able to have a safe drive on the road. So in the same way, the laws of karma, the principles which keep everything in balance within the material world. If the laws of karma are broken, there are results for breaking the laws of karma. But the problem is people don't see those results immediately. Sometimes people have this joke, like they kind of do something to someone and then they like get pinched or something. They say, oh, instant karma. I'll say that jokingly, instant karma. But Chaitanya Charan Prabhu is making the point that when people accept the law of karma as a law, just like they accept traffic laws, then it immediately creates a sense of inherent morality within people. Because as we understand in the Bhagavad Gita, Dayato Vishayam Pumsam, Sangat Te Supajayate, Sangat Samjayate Kaman, Kama Krodha Bijayate. That the primary thing which binds the consciousness of a person in this world is this desire for material enjoyment. And when that material enjoyment is sought after unrestrictedly, it contaminates the consciousness. Yehi samparsa japoka dukkha yonaya evate. What is that? Dukkha yonaya evate? It means they become a prisoner of their own activities. Parabhava syavada bhotajato. That due to lack of awakened intelligence, they become bounded by their miserable activities, and then they become defeated by those activities. So the activities which they're performing are miserable, and then they become bounded by those same activities. So if one doesn't understand the principles of the law of karma, then what will take place is one will break those laws of karma for the sake of getting ahead in the material world, for the sake of fulfilling the demands of their senses. So that's what's being described here, is that due to a lack of intelligence within the people of Kali Yuga, they're not able to know what to do and what not to do. And they don't take into consideration the consequences of their action. I think Radheshyam Prabhu said the other day That intelligence means to see the far-reaching consequences of your actions. So people in Kali Yuga, they don't see the consequences of their actions. Many times, for instance, like corruption in government. Corruption in government functions on the basis of people thinking that in order to get ahead, they have to lie and cheat others in order for them to become prominent. But if one is conscientious of the law of karma, just like someone's conscientious of traffic laws, they understand that when they lie and cheat others, they are incurring a result by which they're going to have to either undergo the same amount of suffering or more suffering, according to how much suffering they caused that person. And that's what's being spoken here regarding unhappy women and children. People in Kali Yuga, because their senses are uncontrolled, because they have no sense of what is right and wrong, pravittim sha nirvittim sha, they engage in all sorts of activities which render themselves miserable and which render others miserable. And what they do, they perform this activity on the basis that there is no oversight to the activities which they perform. They have no conception that there is someone overseeing them and someone guiding them and someone protecting them and also someone meting out the results of the activities. So there's this verse which we cite before, Om Vishnu Param Padam Tata. This verse, Om Vishnu Paramam Padam Tata. What is it? What is it? Yeah, Sada Pashyanti Surayaha. So this verse is speaking about Sada Pashyanti Surayaha, that don't think that any of your activities are not under the foresight of divinity. All of your activities are under the foresight of the divinity. And what's the means of witnessing those activities? Sada Pashyanti Surayaha. The sun is the witness of all activities. And then if it's the night, the moon is the witness of your activities. So you can never be free from the surveillance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just like if someone breaks a traffic law and they run a red light and there's a camera, the state has surveillance in place in order to catch the criminals who run a traffic light. And then they think, oh yeah, I got away. But then 2 weeks later, they have a violation in their mailbox. So in the same way, when one breaks the laws of material nature, you get a little traffic notice 5 lifetimes later saying, oh, by the way, we saw you run that red light, and now you have to pay for it. So people don't take these actions into consideration. People don't take their consequences into consideration. And because of that lack of knowledge, so many people have to suffer. And then simultaneously, when people, as it's being said here, Brahmanas are traditionally intelligent men. When people who are Brahmanas, who are supposed to be representatives of a spiritual tradition, misuse those laws of nature, break those laws of nature, break the laws of society, then what it does is it produces a consciousness in people, helpless people who don't know any better, who immediately take up an atheistic disposition, because they feel that if someone in the name of spirituality can behave in such a polluted and degraded way, what's the value of spirituality to begin with? So, because generally in atheistic society, the activities of an atheistic scientist, they're not put on display. It's just like the Chaitanya Charitamrita says, how if a sannyasi has misconduct, it's like a black stain on white cloth. So anyone who is a sadhu, anyone who is trying to practice a spiritual tradition, their activity, if they break the laws of nature, they break the laws of society, and they act in an immoral way, they act in a sinful way, that is amplified more so than the same activity performed by someone with an atheistic disposition. So the life of Krishna consciousness is a life of responsibility. It's a life of being very conscientious of our conduct, being very conscientious of our behavior, for the purpose of pleasing Krishna. It's not necessarily for the purpose of making us look good within the eyes of society. It's for the purpose of giving pleasure to Krishna, and it's for the purpose of representing the movement of the spiritual master. So Srila Prabhupada, he would often tell his disciples when they would go to Vrindavan, the devotees would be riding through the streets of Vrindavan on tuk-tuks. I don't know if they had tuk-tuks at the time, but I think they only had tungas, right? With the horse. They hit the horse and it goes all the way down the road. So they'd be going through Loli Bazaar at that time. I don't know if it was Loli Bazaar, same name. But they'd be going through the streets and they'd be taking things from the Brajbasis. And, the local Brajbasis would go and complain. And he said, the Brajbasis, Prabhupada would speak with his disciples, the Brajbasis will give you anything. But when you steal, it's a stain on my character. So devotees don't necessarily have good behavior for the sake of good behavior itself. They don't observe the principles of Dharma for the purpose of Dharma itself. Actually, just for the purpose of performing Dharma, Raghunath Das Goswami says, na dharmam shrutigana niruktam kilikaru. Give that up. For the sake of just performing Dharma for having a good position in this world, and for the sake of avoiding adharma, for having a bad position in this world, give all of that up. And what do? Braje Radha Krishna Prachura Paricharyam Ihatanu. With fixed attention, worship Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan. So one can adopt the principles of Dharma, not necessarily for the sake of Dharma. One adopts the principles of Dharma for the purpose of representing the spiritual master. Because if one does not follow the principles of Dharma, if one does not live carefully according to the principles of Dharma, it's a stain on the society of devotees. And what it does is it perpetuates an atheistic disposition in society. This girl, when she's saying that I don't like religion because it's sexist, because the Christians don't treat women properly, the Muslims don't treat women properly. She said, I don't know about your books. And I was thinking, well, we haven't really treated women properly all the time either. So the point is that if a materialistic person who's devoid of religion behaves in this way, no one pays attention to it. No one cares about it. No one really even thinks about it. Actually, the perpetrators of women are not generally on a mass scale the practices of a spiritual tradition. The perpetrators of children are not generally on a mass scale followers of religion. But when followers of a spiritual practice do those things, it acts as a black stain on the tradition itself. It acts on a black stain of the path of theism. And it pushes people away from even wanting to accept the tradition. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he explains that the primary cause of atheism within Kali Yuga is an immature definition of the absolute truth. So even if we as Vaishnavas have the philosophy of Srimad Bhagavatam, even if we as devotees have the chanting of the holy names of Krishna, even if we have the highest philosophy, if our conduct does not properly represent the exaltation of those principles, of the position of Bhagavatam, the position of the holy name, then people will not be able to appreciate what we're actually giving them. And that's the effect of Kali Yuga, is those who are supposed to be representing spiritual wisdom, their conduct becomes corrupted, and due to that corrupted conduct, it creates an atheistic disposition in society. Because an immature definition of God is the primary cause of atheism. Immature definition of God doesn't just mean you have a big philosophy. It also means you have perfect character. So when Sanatana Goswami came to Jagannath Puri, Raghunath Das Goswami said, Achara Prachar Karaduikar Prachar. I'm forgetting the full verse, but he's saying that it's actually Sanatana Goswami, Glory Raghunath Das Goswami. He says some people They chant the holy names. They perform bhajan very well. But they don't have good behavior. And then some people, they have good behavior, which means they preach, they go out and spread Krishna consciousness, or they have good bhajan, but they don't preach. Some people preach and they don't have good bhajan. But you, Haridas Thakur, you have good behavior and you also preach. Good behavior means absorption in the holy name. It means careful attention to the principles of devotional service, careful attention to the common principles which society can appreciate, such as honesty, truthfulness. And simultaneously, it means that for the sake of preaching, a devotee is actually willing to abandon those things if it's favorable to the service of Krishna. This is why Raghunath Das Goswami says, Na dharmam na dharmam shrutigana niruktam kilakuru. Whatever is favorable to the service of Radha and Krishna, one should accept. And what is unfavorable, one should reject. So for instance, there's sometimes principles of dharma which are of a lower scale. One of which is the most popular is one's disposition towards family. So it said, Devarshi bhutapa pratam pratanam nayam nana kinkaron rinicha rajan. That due to being born in this world, immediately one has a debt which they have to fulfill in relationship to various living entities. The debt which is generally the most prominent for many people is the debt which they have to their family. Because their family has done so much for them, especially if they come from a very good family. Their parents, their mother was always home in order to give them proper scripts of getting emotional care and affection, and simultaneously, the mother also plays a very important role in providing spiritual education. The father was always able to provide everything that the child needed. And so when the child grows, according to a dharmic society, the child is supposed to take responsibility for the parents. But if one has awoken this faith of Shara Shabde Vishwas Kohe Sudrit Nishchai Krishna Bhakti Koila Sarva Karma Kirtahai. If one has awoken this standard of faith and the principles of pure devotional service, then even if one has to neglect certain principles of dharma for the sake of serving the higher principle of faith in the principles of pure devotional service, it's not considered immoral. And actually, that activity becomes an example for the rest of society. That example becomes a shining jewel in the society of Vaishnavas. Why? Because it shows that the highest principle of life is not simply to deal in the principles of morality, but it's to move towards a life of transcendence. It's to move towards a life of surrender and sacrifice. So you see in the life of Raghunath Das Goswami, from a principle of dharma, he could have remained as a Vaishnava, he could have continued to care for his wife, he could have continued to care for his family. But because his faith became so inflamed by the mercy of Nityananda Prabhu and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the highest principle for him was to leave that circumstance and take direct shelter of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who then handed him over to Sarup Damodar. And then he received the essential instructions by which one can make substantial spiritual advancement. Gramya kata na shunibe, gramya varta na poibe. Bala na poibe ar, bala na koibe. That give up all talk of so-called family affection. Give up all talk of mundane topics. Give up all talk of what is right and what is wrong within this world. Don't dress very nicely and don't eat nice foods. And then Mahaprabhu gives this wonderful verse. He says, Amani Mundanahan Krishna Nama Shadalabe. Braje Radha Krishna Manasa Paibe. That one should always remain humble and offer all respect to everyone and not respect any respect for oneself. And simultaneously, one should chant the holy names of the Lord constantly. And within one's mind, Braje Radha Krishna Manasa Paibe. One should be remembering the service of Shri Shri Radha and Krishna. So this is the highest principle of Dharma which one can align with. And whatever needs to be rejected and whatever needs to be accepted in order to move towards that, that's the ultimate principle of morality. And that is the nuance of Bhagavad Gita. That is the nuance of Srimad Bhagavatam. Is that higher than the principles of morality within society is the spiritual morality which is being offered by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. The love letter which Krishna writes to the jivas in the Bhagavad Gita is saying that actually if you want, you can give all of this up and you can come towards me. And when someone does this, we can see that their character and their example becomes the greatest catalyst for creating a theistic disposition within society. So this is why spiritual life is like walking on a razor's edge. On one side, you have to be extremely careful about the principles which are common amongst society, but simultaneously, one should not be so attached to those principles that they lose track of the highest principle of full-fledged surrender to Krishna. So it's 8:10. We generally stop at 8:15, right? Yeah. So we can have discussion. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
You came up with such beautiful points even in 2 minutes. I personally liked how you mentioned that even though there are many people who are doing wrong against women or children, if they are not followers of religion, they do not come in picture so much. But if a person who is so-called practitioner of spiritual movement, even a bona fide movement, he would be accountable and he would be projected much more. So we have to be very careful in our activities. I liked how you connected that to walking on a razor edge. We have to be careful about our conduct in general, and at the same time, we are ready to break the principles when it is required. Of course, not so much in terms of four regulatory principles, but in terms of this expected behavior in the world. For example, we go to book distribution in the door-to-door, and there is written no soliciting.
Yeah, but we knock anyways.
And as you mentioned once during college book distribution, that we distribute books first and we ask for permission later. And I we don't ask for permission first. We distribute books and we beg forgiveness later. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Anyone else?
I wanted to share something. We've heard, there's a class by Kesha Swami Maharaj we've heard multiple times. Kesha Swami, about how we should be beyond suspicion and doubt. So in that class, Maharaj raises the point that Prabhupada was always beyond suspicion. The fact that for maybe 12 years, every single activity he performed was videotaped. Every word he spoke was audio recorded, and almost every pastime that he has performed, they were all captured by somebody. And in none of these situations did anybody find anything out of place in Prabhupada's character. So it was spotless. And you spoke about how for sannyasis, even a small lapse in judgment would cause a black spot, and it would be very visible. And I was reflecting about how it takes years, maybe decades, to build a certain reputation, but it would take hardly a fraction of a second to break that reputation.
Correct.
So we should be beyond suspicion and always for the highest dharma that we are.
Yeah, wonderful point. I like what you were saying about it can take years to build a reputation, but that can be lost within a matter of seconds. One's not careful.
And then to build a reputation again.
Yeah, it's very, very difficult. It's very
like
difficult.
Glass, if it breaks once, it can never be put back.
Yeah. Yeah, Suvarna Bindu Prabhu once told me, he said, if you don't have a proper reputation, then where's the possibility of ever being able to preach? If you don't have a good reputation, then the possibility of preaching. You have something to say, Avanish Prabhu?
I always have something to say.
All right, let's hear it.
I wasn't here for the first part of the lecture, so you may have covered it already, but I was just thinking how in tune this was with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's encounter with Keshav Kashmir, the
Mhm.
pandit who
Yeah.
helped you defeat the people of Navadvip. He specifically, after pointing out the flaw in one of his verses of the 100 verses he recited in glorification of the Ganga,
Mhm.
he gives these exact arguments that even if one of the verses, even though he cited many that were perfect, if even one verse is incorrect, then that's like a spot of leprosy.
Mm.
It's like yes, this person is great, but that one spot of leprosy that's going to ruin the whole person.
Yeah. Correct.
Very similar points.
Correct. Vijay Prabhu or Adinath Prabhu? Nothing?
I appreciate
Um,
one point. A mature definition of absolute truth leads to an atheistic disposition, or even within the theistic tradition, an incomplete understanding.
Mhm.
And that oftentimes leads again to atheistic conduct, or strengthening that atheistic disposition.
Yeah.
Again, these are what in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, Prabhupada has written, the two greatest enemies to positive and progressive religion is it creates division and then intense party feelings.
Yeah.
Just as that gentleman we met with yesterday, he said he was a philosophy major. So I asked him a simple question. I said, "Who are you?" And he didn't answer for probably 10 seconds. And then he started saying biological epigenetics and so forth. So this is a misunderstanding. Coming back to this point of whatever he believes in the absolute truth and what's responsible for creation, etc.,
Mhm.
is obviously wrong. So just appreciating that point, and to close is, I read that not having a Mahanta guru, a living guru at some point,
Mhm.
there is all possibility of being misdirected.
Yeah.
Thank you for highlighting.
Hare Krishna. No, I felt bad for that girl yesterday. I felt she was just a victim of Kali Yuga. Because I could see she wasn't really clear about why she was thinking the way she was. She just has bad experience. And in one sense, I don't blame her. You know, in many ways, women have been mistreated, and there are principles in religion in order to glorify and exaltate women, but it's not the same way you glorify and exaltate a man. But because of the way women are meant to be glorified and exaltated, generally irresponsible men have used that as a way to repress and exploit them. So it's very unfortunate that such ideas exist in society, because actually the principles of Sri Dharma, when followed properly, it's the greatest way for a woman to make spiritual advancement and for society in general to be protected. They become safe and men become safe, actually. So it's a great misfortune of Kali Yuga. But the Krishna consciousness movement has been designed to educate people in these principles of progressive spiritual life. So we just have to keep trying our best, and ultimately things are in the hands of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's the one running the show. We're just trying to have a part to play, be an extra.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Can I ask a question? An off-topic question from the verse? Sorry?
Go ahead.
Okay, the question I had was, what classifies someone as a Vaishnav? And the reason why I asked this is I was just reading Dhruva Maharaj's pastimes, and I'm just trying to understand. It seems like Lord Vishnu sees him as a Vaishnav, and he saw that like for example, his stepmother was being disrespectful and committing aparad toward him, and accordingly he fulfilled those desires that Dhruva Maharaj had. because he saw him as a Vaishnav, but he was, I guess what confuses me is because Dhruva Maharaj was still kind of purifying himself. So like what is, that's where I'm a little confused. What is a Vaishnav, what determines a person to be a Vaishnav or not?
Well, actually, the same question is asked in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Mahaprabhu gives four different answers. One is a Vaishnava, a Satsanga Tyag, a Vaishnavachar. That those who give up a Satsanga to associate with Krishna, they should be considered a Vaishnava. And then within the category of Vaishnava, there's different grades of Vaishnava. There's a Kanishta Adhikari, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says is someone who's chanted Hare Krishna once. And then someone who chants Hare Krishna purely, regularly, is a Madhyama Adhikari. And then there's Uttama, an Uttama Vaishnava, which is someone just by the very glance of which induces other people to chant Hare Krishna. But for us, we can understand who's a devotee based on their willingness to give up the association of a satsanga. And a satsanga doesn't just mean association with people. It also means the association with ideological concepts and social values of an atheistic materialist society. So someone who gives those things up for the purpose of understanding and loving Krishna, that person should be understood as a Vaishnava. So even if they're not pure in their faith, but they're willing to make the voluntary life changes needed in order to move closer to Krishna. They may not be perfect, but they should be considered as Vaishnavas. They should be considered as devotees, according to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Thanks, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Sattva, do you have anything to say? Okay.